Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Miller, and I'm a global partner at Terra International. And I'm delighted to bring you a tool on self-compassion. And you will notice that we, over time, will be building quite a library of tools about this topic. Well, why is that? Because self-compassion is critical to our leadership. Now, in our true leadership model, one of the key dimensions of our model is awareness. To grow and expand and evolve as a leader, as a human being, we actually need to be able to observe ourselves and see what aspects of our leadership are working and which ones are not working as well. The only way that we can take a real honest look and reflect and see some of the parts of ourselves that maybe aren't working as well, some of the beliefs that we have that undermine our leadership, behavioral patterns, emotional patterns, ways of being that really aren't working for us, is if we're actually quite tender with ourselves, that we have compassion towards the fact that all of us have patterns of thinking, feeling, behaving, and relating that actually are not really working that well for us. So the tool that we're focusing on today is about the difference between making judgments versus discernments. So we're going to be looking at, instead of judging, how can we actually discern and learn from the inevitable mistakes, failures, challenges, and difficulties that we all experience. Now, you're probably, I imagine, quite familiar with the voice of the inner critic, right? So the inner critic is that voice in you that does things like criticizes your behavior, your physical appearance, your personality, different ways that you operate, criticizes you in terms of your intelligence or your abilities. The inner critic is connected to feeling like an imposter or like a fraud. And that is a voice that all human beings have. The purpose of that voice is actually to be a protector. There's a way in which we feel like that criticizing ourselves is central to how we get ourselves to motivate ourselves, to change, to look good, to prevent ourselves from making mistakes, to prevent ourselves from failing. Sometimes we feel like the surest way to avoid an attack, a criticism from outside of us, is to attack or criticize ourselves first. And so there is a way in which the inner critic is keeping us vigilant, on the lookout for any indication that we might be criticized from someone outside. The problem is that the inner critic is actually not very motivating, not particularly inspiring. It makes us feel terrible, and it does not really actually help us change or evolve. It makes us shut down. It makes us feel like we need to show up and be a certain way that really isn't authentic to who we are. So we need an alternative to this kind of inner judge, this inner critic. So what we're going to do is talk about the difference between judging and discerning, and we're going to go through a tool together so that you can actually begin to practice and flex this muscle of discerning. So when we discern, instead of saying you're not enough of this, you're no good at that, and criticizing ourselves, we're actually stepping back and looking at a failure, a difficulty, a challenge, and situation, and asking ourselves, what can I learn here? How is this actually maybe helpful to my leadership development? What's going on here in terms of what I need to change, right? Not from a judgmental kind of place, but more from a place of curiosity, where we're actually looking to see what we can learn from the situation and how this situation, in a sense, can be a really great teacher for us and help us maybe see things that we couldn't see before, as opposed to an occasion to beat ourselves up. So we're looking to see how we can improve, what we could do differently without the self-criticism. So let me pull up this tool for you. Okay, so now this idea comes from a great book called Self-Compassion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself by Kristen Neff, and you'll see the title up there at the top of this tool. I highly recommend reading her book. If you feel like you want to develop more self-compassion, this book will make a huge difference in the quality of your life. So the step one, and you'll see I filled this out already just to walk you through an example, and I would like you to join me. The first thing I want you to do is begin by capturing where you're struggling, suffering, or feeling pain in your life. And it can be a specific situation that occurred where that you were involved in some kind of breakdown, you made a mistake, something did not go right. It could be an argument you had with somebody, a mistake you made at work, whatever it is. Go ahead and write down some area of struggle, suffering, feeling pain, mistake, difficulty. This is one that I did, and I encourage you to pick one where you know the inner critic came out and gave you a bit of a self-lashing. So this happened to me this past year where right after the holidays, I bounced the entire company payroll. And so I got an email from our payroll letting me know that since it was the first time I did it, they still paid everybody, and that I had 24 hours to wire the money to them, and I was going to be charged a bunch of fees. Now, this had never happened to me before, and I felt shocked by having done this. I felt so embarrassed. I remember having to go to the bank and actually wire the money, and I was so embarrassed when I was standing in front of the teller working this out with her. So what did I do? And I want you to think for yourself about what were some of the judgments. What did the inner critic say for you in that left-hand column? If at any point you need more time when you're watching this video, please hit pause and then come back and hit play when you're ready to continue. Here's the kinds of things I said to myself. You're not present. WTF, Allison, like in kind of an angry way. I started to think I'm not managing my life well. So this one thing of bouncing the company payroll, I started to now make kind of a generalization to my entire life that I actually wasn't managing my life well. You need to get your act together. And I was saying that in a rather harsh tone to myself, telling myself I'm careless and that you're overcommitted and it's your fault, right? So you can imagine how that felt to hear myself say all of that. So go ahead right now in that left-hand column and write down, what did your inner critic, what does it say about the area where you're struggling or suffering? How does it criticize you? How does it criticize your abilities, your personality, your focus? Any kind of criticisms that you notice. You are, you're not, you need to be, what's wrong with you? If you were smarter, you wouldn't have. You're out of control. Okay. Now, let's stay in that left-hand column for a moment. I just want you to take a moment and actually notice, how does it feel in the body to hear yourself saying those kinds of things to yourself? Sometimes we don't actually even know that the inner critic is talking to us until we can recognize and feel it in the body. Sometimes we feel that in terms of emotions, of feeling sad, frustrated, a sense of disgust or shame, angry, irritable. We may also experience sensations like a heaviness in the chest, tightness in the heart, muscles tight, jaw tight. You might notice a pit in our stomach. So be on the lookout for what are the emotional and body sensation signs that you're moving into a space of being self-critical. And that's often how you can step back and say, wait a minute, what am I saying to myself about this situation? Okay, so instead of judging ourselves, a really important alternative, and this is like a muscle that we can develop, is the ability to discern. So here are some examples of discernments I can make about the fact that I bounced the company payroll. Instead of I'm not present, well, what actually happened? Like, is it true that I'm just not present? No, what actually happened was I lost track of the money in various accounts. I just lost track. I wasn't paying attention. It doesn't mean I'm not present across the board. In reality, I lost track. Instead of WTF, Allison, you know what? I didn't have a reminder in my calendar. There was no system in place to remind me. Instead of I'm not managing my life well, here's the truth. It actually just didn't occur to me to check accounts. It's really not true that I'm not managing my life well, but it is true that it did not occur to me to check the accounts. I never had this happen before. It's not really true that I need to get my act together. Well, what is true is I was in holiday mode. I was totally in holiday mode. I wasn't paying attention. And I wasn't being careless. I was actually enjoying being relaxed. See, now one of the vulnerabilities is that what can happen is we can tell ourselves, well, from now on, our judgments often tell us, well, from now on, you always have to be vigilant and you better not ever happen this again. And you can't relax that much. I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to send myself the message that I'm not allowed to let go and relax, right? So instead of telling myself that I'm overcommitted and it's my fault, well, what's actually true is that I need reminders, especially during slower periods. So that when I'm going to move into a holiday time or time when I'm taking off, it would be important for me. And I can discern from this experience, it's important for me to think through what are some of the fundamental things that need to happen inside the business that I need or someone else needs to take over. I need to be reminded of, or I need to have another person take that over for me. That seems like a really good lesson from this. So instead of taking away the conclusion that I've got to be vigilant on top of it and I can't relax and unwind, maybe it's better to actually recognize that I need to make sure that there's some kind of system in place for myself when I am slowing down and taking time to relax and work in a less engaged way. So take some time right now, look at your judgments, and go ahead and write down what are some of the discernments. What can you learn? How can you grow? What is the situation teaching you? What is it offering you? Stepping back and having a larger perspective on what's happening and what you need, what the situation calls for, so that you're asking yourself to discern with a kinder heart from a gentler place without all the judgment and harshness. Just take all the time you need. Hit pause if you need to. Okay. Now, remember, when you learn to discern, it's actually going to be much more likely to lead to meaningful change. It can feel unnatural to do this in the beginning, so we need practice. So we encourage you to use this tool again and again. Get your judgments outside of yourself on paper, and then it's easier to switch gears and practice and kind of build that muscle of discerning. Remember, this is a far more compassionate way of relating to yourself and the reality that you're going to experience challenges and breakdowns in your life. That's just part of life. Now, one key thing, discerning is not about being irresponsible in your life. It's not about condoning things, right? And saying that it's okay to make mistakes, but rather it's about gently, kindly, and honestly encouraging and supporting yourself to make real change in your life. And this is one of the most effective ways that we can counteract the inner critic, is to learn how to discern. And it will become second nature and natural to you with practice. So make sure you look on this site. You're going to see other self-compassion tools. And we would actually love to hear from you and hear your questions about self-compassion, any specific questions about this tool. Feel free to send a note on the website under Ask a Coach, or to leave your comments and questions below. Okay, thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to practice self-compassion with each and every one of you.